Hello, I am back finally after about 8 months. I think it's been. This is, I think I've just figured out actually, this is my 50th video. How did that happen? That's gone very fast, hasn't it? So, yeah, so I've got a bit of a cold, so if my throat sounds a little bit weird, I'm sorry. So anyway, yeah. I'm going to be doing a mixer brush video now. I recently recorded this a few days ago, and for this I'm only going to be using just the mixer brush, and with just using this one rectangular brush you can see here. So I'm now showing you the setup I've got for the brushes in Photoshop, and hopefully you can kind of like just see the very kind of basic setup for that, for what I've got going on for this. And yeah, you can see that there. I will put the brush down in the description, so you can play around with it as well. But it's a very just simple rectangular brush. It's not really that tricky to use. But yeah, let's get on with it. So as usual with all my videos, if the video is going a little bit too fast or a little bit too slow, like probably isn't ever too slow, remember you can slow down the player speeds in the settings on the actual YouTube player with that little cog button. So yeah, so sometimes I get people saying it's a bit too fast, but you can always slow it down to whatever speed you want to right on the player if you need to. So yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with what the mixer brush is, so like again, this is all in Photoshop. I'm sure there might be a very similar option in Procreate or other software that's out there. I like to think of the mixer brush as a very similar tool to how you might paint traditionally. And the way that I'm going to be painting in this video is very much kind of like that. So essentially trying to think instead of picking up paint and colour from the canvas like you would if it was real, gloopy, you know, kind of wet, traditional paint, you know. So, and everything that kind of comes with that as well will also kind of be applicable here as well. So one of the main things about the mixer brush is that unlike with a normal Photoshop brush, you know, where you would use the eyedropper tool to select or find like one color, instead, this is what I really like about the mixer brush, and especially how I'm using it in this video. You instead choose or sample a select area of the canvas, and this can also include multiple bits of color or texture or kind of like anything that you are literally sampling at the time, and then you can then paint with that, and that immediately gives your brush stroke so much more kind of like life to it, a vibrancy, you know. And hopefully what you'll see throughout this video is that kind of level of freedom that the mixer brush gives you in comparison to just using a normal Photoshop brush. But before you do that, you're going to have to put some colors down first. So you essentially still have to use the mixer brush at the very beginning, like I did in this video and what I'm doing right now, where you still have to choose a base color that you want to put down. And this all depends on what you're painting, obviously, and what you kind of know about color theory, and what color do you want to put down first. You know, we're trying to make a palette on the canvas, and once you start getting colors down, you can then start sampling them, and then essentially then start mixing them, which I imagine is where the name mixer brush comes from. So yeah. So in this video, I'm painting a warm canyon environment. So I want to make sure that the colors that I'm putting down in the very beginning, like I'm doing right now, are warm, and I'm trying to kind of like think about the value grouping that I'll get into more later. I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit more later on. So, but at this stage, I'm just trying to put down some base foundation colors. So, like I'm started with like a nice big bit of orange to put out the shape of where I want the canyon kind of to be. I've also then started using a very warm but very dark red for, I think, where some of the hardest and the darkest shadows should be. And I'm also now using the lasso, I can never pronounce that correctly, to start masking out the area of the pathway that I'm going to have in this painting as well. I think something that's really important to let you know as well about this is that the mixer brush, if you are using it in a different way than I am, because I am using this in a very specific setup, so I'll quickly now go over the kind of the settings that I'm actually using. So at the top you can see like I don't have sample or layers checked, and this is because I imagine on most computers, if you've got like a lot of layers and you have that checked, what the mixer brush is going to do is that it's going to sample like everything that's like just on screen, and that can be very, very intensive for your computer. So I try not to use that, and so instead of doing that, I instead do an apply image on every new layer I want to, and that is on the drop down box on image at the top left. And you scroll down and you just click apply image, and that will apply exactly what you can see on screen on your canvas to a layer at that time. And it's really, really useful because then you can save a lot of CPU and things go a little bit quicker, thankfully. You'll probably see that I've set that up as a shortcut, apply image I mean by that, and just to speed it up, instead of me continually going to the menu and just clicking the same thing again. So if you see a little orange box appear throughout the video sometimes, that is the apply image box coming up, so yeah. You can see the rest of the setup that I'm using for this, and this is the kind of same setup I've been using recently for all of my other dailies as well. I've got you can see it at the top left, right at the top, so I've got wet set to 0, and I've got load set to 100%. And to avoid me kind of maybe saying something that's maybe a bit incorrect, I'm just going to refer to the Adobe Photoshop website to see what it says, what wet means in the sense of the mixer brush. So essentially it apparently means that it controls how much paint the brush picks up from the canvas, and higher settings will produce longer paint streaks. So I've put this at 0 because I don't really want to have any streaky kind of blurring kind of effect to happen when I'm doing this. In the style that I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to put very kind of like block colours down and allow the sampling to really kind of add the little differences and the little colour variations in the strokes, rather than it be in the wetness and the streaking of the brush strokes that could possibly come out of that. But just because I'm doing it this way doesn't mean that you have to either. Like, I really do think that the mixer brush is one of those things that you really just have to experiment with. Like, there's so many different little settings that you can play with to kind of see what works for you. But yeah, just for this video, this is just the setup that I'm using. So yeah, anyway, so you can see that I've got load as 100%, and again, referring back to the official Adobe website about this, it's apparently load specifies the amount of paint loaded into the reservoir. So I guess, you know, how much paint is my brush picking up. So at low load rates, apparently paint strokes dry out more quickly. So as soon as I've got it at 100%, this essentially means that it's like having it at full opacity, like you would when you might have a normal Photoshop brush set to pressure sensitivity with opacity, you know, stuff like that. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to kind of put these very big, bold shapes down, and I want to replicate as much as possible the idea of like painting traditionally, like putting down, you know, like full globules of paint that, you know, can then be mixed together with the mixer brush. So having everything kind of very like high opacity, high load, this kind of stuff allows the colors to be very sharp and bright, and then when they do start kind of mixing together, these little streaks of paint and little streaks of detail can then be seen much more boldly. The two buttons next door to the, well actually I probably should explain as well, that little box here, I'll put a little icon here hopefully, go on then, done, great. That is showing your sample box, and that's showing exactly what you've picked up from the canvas, and that is essentially what your brush is going to be putting down. So yeah, so next door to that, to the right of that, you've got these two little buttons, and so far I just keep these turned on, but obviously, as I said, you should play around with these settings to see what works for you. So the first one means that the brush will keep automatically loading the same sample after each stroke that you put down. So this is obviously unlike in real life where you would have to go back to the I don't know, the reservoir, the little like paint dab you've done, and you'd have to like re-dab your brush, you know. So like it's obviously unlike that. Like here, it will just keep making sure that the brush puts down the same thing every time. And for the second button, that means that the brush will automatically clean itself once you've put down a stroke as well. So I keep both of these turned on, so I'm pretty much just painting with my sampled kind of area without having to continually resample all the time. I think you can start to see how the brush is creating these very kind of nice, very streaky kind of like looks and strokes now. Especially kind of in the yellows and kind of like the midground. Like obviously at this stage the painting still looks like a bit of a mess, but I'm already trying to get quite a lot of colour variation in just from like sampling little different parts of the image really, and then applying it to other areas of it. As with all my paintings, like these are always quite messy at this point, and I always say to everyone whenever people ask me about kind of like planning images and stuff like that, like I think people worry about things being like perfect like the whole way through, you know, and especially when you're using something like the mixer brush, like you really have to kind of expect it to look a bit messy, you know, and that is kind of the point, and that is kind of the point of this style that I'm trying to go for as well. Like I want it to look a little bit mucky, I want it to look a little bit like all over the place and a little bit more kind of loose and a bit more free form. And also kind of lied to you a little bit, like I obviously am using one other brush, but it's my favourite little painterly brush that I use for just for, you know, filling in gaps and stuff, and just kind of adding a little bit of a softer edge to it. But you know, I'm sure people will ask, so I will also put this in the description as well, so don't worry about that. You can see I am also using things like the pen tool as well, because I think it's about now that I want to start changing the pathway a little bit. So like with all my other videos and my other pieces and stuff like that you might have seen on my channel, if you've had a look, I do try to use, like as I said, the lasso tool a lot, because especially when you're doing something like this, when you're using very kind of like blocky colors and you're using a very high opacity thing, it's a really good way of trying to refine your shapes down, you know. So really do try to use this way of like masking out things and then painting into it, because it really is a really helpful tool that I use all the time. I think by now you can start to see kind of the image kind of coming together as well. So what I really wanted for this is I wanted to have, a very warm environment, and you can see hopefully I'm starting to put like very kind of warm tones, bounce light tones into some of the areas on the rocks and stuff. And I'm also just trying to be very graphic, you know. As I said, I want this to be very blocky and stuff like that, and I want to avoid there being any kind of mushy kind of like colors, you know. When you tend to use opacity controls, which I often do still, I still do that, I think sometimes they can very easily get a little bit muddy. And yeah, one of the reasons I like working like this is that it kind of forces you to be very just be confident, not necessarily be confident, but just be happy with what you put down. And then because a lot of the time you wouldn't even realise that whether it'll work or not, or it might be a happy accident and stuff. And especially when you're also working with the mixer brush, you can pick up an area of the painting and then pop it down somewhere, and then it might look even better than you might think, you know. And I think sometimes using opacity tools, like, it can be detrimental to when you're trying to learn, because it stops you from putting these bold shapes down. So I think now's a good time for me to talk about like why and what I'm putting down, and like kind of my thought process behind it. So you can see right now I'm putting down these kind of very dark red marks right now, so, and you can see them on the right side of the screen as well. Essentially what I'm trying to do whenever I'm painting like this, and it's much easier to kind of do when you're painting like this as well, you know, as I said, when you're putting down very bold shapes that aren't, you know, kind of they're not any kind of lower opacity than that, you know what I mean. So yeah, what that essentially means is that I'm trying to group my values together, and what I really mean by that, I'm trying to have very simplistic values in my painting. And if you don't really know what a value means, it's essentially the darkness or the lightness of a colour. So this can really mean things like the shadows, or the very kind of lit areas in a painting, or something, you know, stuff like that. So I honestly think that value is probably one of the most important parts of a painting, because value helps us to create readability in our paintings, and it essentially allows us to read what we're seeing. And I want to have simplistic values in this painting, and simplified forms, because on top of it hopefully making the piece very readable, it also helps me ignore very pointless details. You'll have seen, like, when I've been putting down this very dark red, this is kind of where I want the darkest value in the scene to be, and I want this colour essentially to really show where the shadows are, and I want it to be simplistic as well, you know. So from afar, I want this one dark value to kind of be the shadow colour throughout the whole painting. And by doing this, it allows the eye to really kind of understand the form and the shape of the elements in the painting. By just using this one value and then like shaping it around the pathway and like the different rocks, it allows you to see how shapes are formed and how forms turn as well. And it does all this in a very simplistic and I think a very nicely graphic way. Something that I've learned from my recent daily sketches that I've been doing is the importance of simplifying my values down and focusing on kind of grouping my values together to make my sketches more readable. What I mean by that is like what I'm doing in this image. Again, like I'm trying to only use one value for the darkest shadows. I'm only using kind of one value or one color for the strong direct sunlight in the center. And then I'm only really using a small range of similar values for my like mid-range areas, like kind of like the areas that aren't the darkest or the very lightest areas. I found it's about trying to use similar values throughout the whole painting to allow the eye to understand exactly what is in light, what is in shadow, and it just helps tie everything together as well. And also it makes it easier for you as well. If you limit your values down to about 4 or 5 of them, kind of like what I've done here, it will make things so much easier when you come to paint your own images. Instead of having loads of tiny little like shadow colors where when you paint a shadow, group them into one big color like I have done here. And I guess that kind of nicely leads me on to what I actually have been doing. As I mentioned, I've been doing a lot of daily sketches recently, I guess. So yeah, what have I been up to since I last did a video, which was 8 months ago? Well, yeah, so I did my last video in August last year, and I was just between jobs at the time, and just after I released that video, I got a new job, and I'm now working as a senior concept artist at a game studio here in the UK. And yeah, it's going really well. And like during that time as well, I was actually also feeling quite. I was feeling pretty down, to be honest. Like I must admit, I kind of got to a stage of my artwork where I kind of felt like. I don't know, I felt a bit stuck, admittedly. So I joined a really cool Discord channel, and I decided to try to start doing some daily sketches and just tried to improve my artwork and maybe just then hopefully improve my mindset on everything as well. And I thankfully I can say that I honestly think it worked. I don't think doing daily sketches is something that everyone should do. I usually quite hate it when people say stuff like that, because it does kind of put like a very toxic work ethic, I think, into people. I don't think that people should have to work every day and do that kind of stuff, but I think for me at the time I just needed to do that. So yeah, last August, just after releasing my last one, I started doing these daily sketches and also started my new job. So that's why I've been not necessarily that busy recently, unfortunately, so I'm sorry about that. So but yeah, I do honestly feel like my what you can see here with this mixer brush video I'm doing now is something that I've learned through doing these daily sketches, and I do honestly think that I've hopefully improved a bit, and I think my mindset on art in general has definitely come back in a positive way, I mean. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good right now. So yeah, so hopefully I can now start to apply some of these things that I've learned from my daily sketches onto this channel, you know, so that would be really good. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. I think now's probably a good time to also talk about the kind of colour choices that I'm trying to make while I'm doing this. I think you can see that I recently just put a bit of like blue down into the kind of shadowy area on one of the sides of the canyon here. Also, like as the video progresses, you'll start to see that I'm adding kind of like little bits of blue and like greeny kind of like colours into a lot of like the shadow areas, the ones that aren't necessarily in the bright light section. And the reason I do this is like it's a bit of a cheap trick that I try to do in a lot of like my paintings, I guess. But like I think that if you can try to put a little bit of like the sky colour into the shadows, you can instantly have this kind of like a bit more vibrancy into your palette, like you're kind of like you're trying to create in the picture. And the reason you do this, the reason that you put a little bit of blue in the sky color is because yeah, when things aren't in like direct sunlight like this, the sky does like transmit or like emit its own color. And if the sky is, you know, blue or gray or, you know, orange or red or purple, you know, anything like that, you know, there will obviously, I think maybe more so with blue possibly, but don't quote me on that. It will start to kind of emit into the shadows, you know, and you'll be surprised just kind of how. This is another thing I've learned from doing my daily sketches and my studies and stuff. Like I've learned that like a lot more of the world is a lot more kind of like in the kind of nuanced like grey than you might think. Like obviously the picture I'm doing right now is very, very bold and block colory, but I also do try to kind of get a little bit of the color of like real life in there, you know. So like if there's this shadowy area, like there will be little bits of blue in the shadows as well, just to show that it's reflecting some of the light of the sky. And if you try to do that, it really will add something. For these sketches as well, I'm trying to start directly in colour as well. Like I'm not using black and white or value like I have in my older videos, if you've seen them. The video I released previously to this, just a few days ago, I also did the same thing. You should go and watch it if you haven't. And I'm trying to. This is not necessarily me trying to never paint in black and white again, but I'm just trying to kind of force myself to kind of like work in color like straight away, because I think this does, especially when you're doing work like this with the mixer brush, you know, you're meant to be mixing these colors together. You're meant to be kind of just putting stuff down and kind of just seeing what is kind of really working. So, and I do honestly think as well, even though I have done a lot of like value to color pictures in the past, and there's nothing wrong with that, I'm finding that I'm getting kind of better colors when I work directly into color. So, but yeah, but it is like, don't get me wrong, it is difficult, like, you know, so it's all trial and error. So, like, you don't beat yourself up if you start in color and you find it difficult and you have to just start in black and white and then add color. That's absolutely fine. Like, do not worry about that. In the same kind of vein about talking about how blue light or skylight gets into the shadows, like I'm also trying to add bounce light into the areas where, like, the underside of like the canyon, you can see here with the very bright reds that I'm putting in. And I want this in there because I want to have some of this very like bright light that's kind of coming in and hitting the ground there in that very bright section. I want that to then bounce up into the overhang shadowy bits and to light them up, you know, because this is actually what happens in real life, you know. And I think if you can like study and like, look at kind of images of real life and look at how light works and all this kind of stuff, you can really see the little tiny bits of like vibrancy that there are in the world, you know. And adding things like skylight and bounce light into your environment will really kind of add to that level of like realism to it, you know, and also just look, yeah, make it look colourful and nice and just, you know, all there. So yeah, I think it's about, you know, when you think about colour, not really thinking it's like, you know, X, Y, Z, you know, like it is, there are so many different little kind of like variations in like everything. So yeah, like it's about being open to kind of really looking into what colours are actually there, and that only really comes from doing a lot of like studying and stuff. And you know, like I'm not saying like every day and anything like that, but you know, if you really want to really see what colours actually are, and then so that you can then apply them to your paintings, just do some studies. Like all the kind of the studies that I've been doing recently have been of old landscape painters, and yeah, like I did get asked this in the live chat yesterday about me talking about some artists that I really admire recently that I found, and one of them is this artist called Edward Harrison Compton. I can't remember the actual particular details of like who he is, but I love his paintings though, and his landscape paintings especially are just very kind of just very beautiful to look at, and they I think for me they were the perfect thing to study, and I've learned so much about kind of my brush efficiency and just kind of like the colours that he uses in his paintings, and like the colours that he saw himself, you know, in the environments that he was looking at. So I'm not usually always in the best position to go out and draw from life or paint from life or anything like that. You know, I'd rather just stay inside, to be honest. But you know, the next best thing a lot of the time is either kind of like, you know, looking at photo studies, or you know, studying how other artists tackle colour, you know, and that is really one of the best ways that you can learn how to apply colour yourself. I would absolutely love to hear what you would like to see from this channel. I'm actually quite enjoyed just sitting here just chatting, really, you know, and talking, and I think I might do more of these kind of things, where I might just ramble about art and about what I've been getting up to in my life, really. But yeah, I would love to obviously hear about what you guys would like to see from this channel, and what kind of content you would like from me. And yeah, I'm sorry that I was away for so long again, but yeah. Anyway, the video is not finished yet, so don't worry. One of the things that I covered in my digital painting tutorial video, which you can probably see at some point, yeah, is that I use one of these tools in Photoshop called the color range tool, and I essentially use it to help me select areas of the painting, so I can then, areas of the painting all at the same time, so I can then paint into them. And you can find it if you go to the drop-down menu, select, and then down to color range. It's a really powerful tool to kind of just help you mask out huge parts of the painting all at once, and then you can kind of paint and chip into that. So, and also you can use it to do painting wide color shifts or brightness shifts, something like that, if you then use it with adjustment layers and things like that too. So yeah, it's really at this stage of the painting where I'm just kind of doing like little details and just trying to figure out what is kind of missing from it. I think right now, even when I look at it now, it just kind of looks like it's kind of missing a bit of like detail. I'm not necessarily liking how the foreground looks at the minute, and I probably will change that. And I think it just needs to have more kind of structure to it, you know. I think I need to put some more kind of dark kind of value shadows in it, just to kind of anchor some of the shapes in the scene a little bit more. And like I've said in a lot of my other videos too, like the process, and it doesn't change even when you're using the mixer brush. The process of like painting or anything, or doing anything like this, it is all a lot of the time just very trial and error, you know. No, I really don't think any artist really goes in thinking that they know exactly what they're going to do 100% all the time. So like I said earlier, I really like this process of using the mixer brush, because it does allow things to look a bit more messier, and then like sometimes you might find little happy accidents as well. The reason that I'm using the rectangular brush as well, and I'm sticking to that as well, is because I think it just kind of has this nice kind of chippy kind of quality to it, you know. I want it to be able to kind of chip away at shapes, and the way that I'm using, like I said, these kind of like dark values to kind of make the forms kind of all come together, that kind of like allows me to start kind of like building my shapes in a really kind of nice kind of graphic and sharp way. I've recently been experimenting with using different shapes of my brushes. Like I started using a triangle shape, and that was like a really interesting way of like kind of creating like different forms of trees and stuff like that too. And I probably will do another video based solely on that soon as well. But yeah, that has been my kind of whistle-stop tour of how I use the mixer brush in my paintings, or well, in my recent paintings anyway. Like I said, if you would like to see anything else from this channel, please do just pop it in the comments below. I do read like all the comments like all the time. I do pay a lot of attention to what you guys are saying. And yeah, like I will have another video, another mixer brush video up soon as well. And I honestly hope that you've taken something from this, and yeah, the video is not going to be done yet. It will play out a little bit longer, and hopefully I'm going to figure out the foreground bit a little bit more. But yeah, that's all for me today. My throat is very sore. I think I need to just sit down and not talk for a while. So yeah, stay safe, and I will see you later.